Hello everyone, I'm your host, the Heebie-Jeebiest, and welcome to my channel. I ask that you please show your support by liking the video and subscribing to my channel. Thank you. In this video, I will be talking about an unusual place called the Bridgewater Triangle, and it has increasingly become the topic in a lot of paranormal discussions lately. I have studied the paranormal for about 2 decades, and have just now heard about this place while doing research for my last video. After hearing about the Bridgewater Triangle, it is one of my favorite places that I'd like to visit one day because of the mass amounts of stories and variety of paranormal activity. It's definitely on the bucket list, and after researching, I would conclude that many of the happenings there are very similar to that of Skinwalker Ranch. It is called the Bridgewater Triangle for a reason, although in my opinion, it seems there's a lot more going on around Bridgewater. In this video, I will be talking about the strange occurrences, sightings, the history, and theories behind this place. So grab a snack and get comfortable. Located in southeastern Massachusetts, Bridgewater Triangle is a 200 square mile area that extends past the actual town of Bridgewater. 3 points of the triangle meet in Abington, Freetown, and Rehoboth. The towns and communities that are within or close by the triangle are Taunton, Raynham, Berkeley, Dighton, Brockton, Easton, and Bridgewater. Before the 1970s, there was no specific nickname. It was later on that a cryptozoologist named Loren Coleman dubbed it the Bridgewater Triangle, and later on in his book, Mysterious America. One of his major accomplishments is writing over 40 books pertaining to the paranormal, pseudoscience, and subculture of cryptozoology. The Bridgewater Triangle is a vast soup of different types of the paranormal and unexplained phenomena. Hardly ever do you hear about places where people have seen it all. It is uncertain what Bigfoot and UFOs have to do with one another or the other phenomena, but they all just seem to go hand in hand there. The most common reported sightings are UFOs, ghosts, glowing orbs, Bigfoot, giant snakes, thunderbirds, pukwudgies, skinwalkers, and more. There are several theories as to what is going on around Bridgewater, Massachusetts, and one of them is that it was cursed by the Native Americans who lived there because of atrocities on the behalf of European settlers. For over 10,000 years, the Wampanoag Indians have inhabited the island of Noep, or present-day Martha's Vineyard. The Wampanoag Nation once included all of the southeastern Massachusetts and eastern Rhode Island. Their numbers were estimated just above 3,000, where they are now around 900 these days. The vast majority of Wampanoag were killed in battles and by disease. The Wampanoag people, the people of the first light, are responsible for saving the Pilgrims from starvation and death during the harsh winter in 1620 to 1621. Their respect for nature and proper use of its bounty made it possible to share their provisions with the Pilgrims, and their story is the basis for the first American Thanksgiving. This, of course, was taken for granted by the settlers, and they were soon betrayed. Many believe Bridgewater was cursed as a result of King Philip's War. Over the years, the colonies continued to expand into Wampanoag land, and relations went sour, and came to a head following the death of Chief Osamequin. Following his father's death, Metacom, also known as King Philip by the English, believed the alliance forged by his father was no longer being honored by the colonists. The colonists demanded the Wampanoag hand over their guns. They also hung 3 tribesmen for the murder of native John Sassaman, who told of a plan to attack the English settlements. Metacom refused the demands and led an uprising of the Wampanoag, Nipmuc, Pocumtuck, and Narragansett tribes. The war was a final attempt to drive out the colonists and is considered the deadliest war America has seen. The colonist army decimated tribes, even killing women and children. Thousands were killed or captured and sold into slavery. After 14 months of fighting, Metacom fled into hiding, but eventually was killed in 1676. He was hanged, beheaded, drawn and quartered, with his head placed on a spike and displayed at Plymouth for 20 years. Back to what I said about Bridgewater Triangle being somewhat similar to Skinwalker Ranch. and bordering one another in terms of a mixed bag of strange encounters. It is said that Uinta Basin, where Skinwalker Ranch is located, is under a curse from the Navajo Indians toward the Ute tribe, who relocated to the Uinta Basin after they joined the U.S. soldiers and betrayed the Navajo. So I do not doubt that Native Americans were very knowledgeable in ways of how to summon forth some pretty dark things upon the land, although they were wise about when and why they used it. One thing I would like to point out, however, that the idea of spirits existing within Bridgewater Triangle was around long before King Philip's War. There is a swamp located within the perimeter named Hockomock by the Wampanoag Indians, and it translates to place where spirits dwell. Perhaps the area has always had an array of extreme paranormal activity, or perhaps it became amplified after the atrocities, and this is aside from the sightings of anguished Wampanoag spirits. Others speculate that a vortex may have just been naturally formed, and another theory that the vortex may have come about as a result of cult activity that occurred in the late 1900s. We will touch more on that in a minute. I wanted to mention that another theory crossed my mind, but that was quickly dismissed after searching for the answer. I wondered if Bridgewater was located on any ley line or intersecting ley lines. Ley lines are described as straight alignments drawn between various historic structures and prominent landmarks. Since the 1960s, members of certain groups believed that certain ley lines demarcate Earth energies and perhaps serve as guidelines for alien spacecraft. The idea was presented in the 1920s by Alfred Watkins, but the idea was not widely accepted until later. But I see no correlation between ley lines and the placement of the Bridgewater Triangle. Another theory behind the paranormal activity is the Lost Wampum Belt. Profile Rock is where the historical figure Anawan received the belt from Philip, the first peace treaty made between the native people of America. Belts of these types were powerful spiritual charms. Some researchers are convinced the curse may have been unleashed on the land after settlers stole the belt from the Wampanoag people. Their area is also known to contain unusually high levels of crystal quartz, therefore making it possibly responsible for the amplified energy. Back to the discussion of cults within the Bridgewater Triangle. This is specifically within the forest, where murders and scattered remains of animals have been investigated by police, detectives, forensic specialists. One woman was beheaded, and 2 others had their skulls crushed. The first reported murder occurred in October 1979, and although it was behind the local school, it tied into a group of self-proclaimed Satanists, who did most of their own rituals within the forest. Those responsible for the murders have been appropriately dealt with, and are either in prison to this day or have died in prison. Animal sacrifices, however, and some murders continued for decades after the arrests were made by other individuals. It is also reported that there are high numbers of gangland murders and suicides. One key to the puzzling mystery within the Bridgewater Triangle may be a 40-ton boulder that originally was resting in the riverbed of the Taunton River. It is called the Dighton Rock, and it has been since moved into the Dighton Rock State Park Museum for the sake of preservation of the rock and its inscriptions. The 6-sided boulder has been laden with unusual shapes, lines, and drawings, which people have questioned for the last 300 years. Numerous attempts have been made to decode the petroglyphs, as they are a combination of Native American, Viking, Portuguese, Chinese, and Phoenician symbols. It is said that the rock commemorated travelers who visited the Indians there from Carthage. 3 of the Phoenician letters possibly translate to king, priest, and idol. There are countless credible sources and stories when it comes to strange sightings, events, and experiences within Bridgewater that I'm not even sure where to begin. It was the man who gave Bridgewater Triangle its nickname, Loren Coleman, who mapped out the reports of the first-hand accounts into a triangular shape. It is said that the communities on each of the 3 points, Abington, Freetown, and Rehoboth, as well as Hockomock Swamp in the center, are some of the most active areas. However it came to be, it is speculated that the Bridgewater Triangle is an interdimensional vortex, or maybe a portal, home to a number of vortexes. It can work as a portal for celestial and terrestrial creatures and spirits for unknown reasons. Some people are able to sense them and feel a range of sensations from tingling on the skin to vibrations emanating from the ground. One theory as to why vortexes open is that they work as vents for Earth's energy. It's a way of dispersing energetic stress in those areas and creates a relief. A vortex is something that has a lot of energy coming in and out of it, and they even bring in a lot of interdimensional energy and are often permanent, whereas portals often are not. They can be opened in a number of ways, including the theory that a strong-willed person can do so. There are vortexes located worldwide, and there are several located within the United States, including Sedona, Arizona, the Uinta Basin in Utah, the Alaska Triangle, St. Augustine, Florida, Lake Michigan, the Bermuda Triangle, and many other places. I even have questions whether or not my previous home in Kentucky was located within an energy vortex, but that may be for another video. Now, continuing on, I have compiled and categorized a list of some common and unique and not so common sightings and encounters. It is important to mention that the first reported UFO sighting in the world occurred in 1639, and some other resources say the 1700s, in the Bridgewater Triangle by Governor John Winthrop. Winthrop had written about two men rowing a boat in the Charles River when they saw a great light in the sky, and that it was darting back and forth between them and the village of Charleston. Diverse other credible sources had witnessed the same light. After the light had disappeared, the men took note that they were suddenly 1 mile upstream, which can be interpreted as an alien abduction. From Donald Kehoe in his book, Flying Saucers Are Real, in 1905, a cigar-shaped craft was spotted at a low altitude over this town. The craft was using searchlights, which swept back and forth across the countryside. After a few moments, the craft rose in a steep climb, and the searchlights blinked out. In 1908, at 4 o'clock in the morning on Halloween, two men witnessed a spectacle in the sky that resembled a searchlight. It played down upon the earth before flashing upward. From Annabelle, summer of 1941. I was 15 years old and working on a farm. I raised my head up and noticed a flash in the sky caused by sunlight reflecting off a metal object. I saw three objects that were cigar-shaped and made of polished metal. They moved in a fashion similar to leapfrog, and it continued until they moved out of sight. They were gone in about 30 seconds, with no exhaust or contrails. There seemed to be countless reports of UFO sightings in the Bridgewater Triangle, but I noticed that the trend seemed to amplify during the 1940s, 1970s, and also in the 2010s. I noticed that the stories of UFOs changed with each decade there were mass sightings. In the 1940s, they were often described as multicolored discs. In the 1970s, they were triangular shaped. Sometimes they were glowing fireballs in formation. The most notable sighting in the 1970s era took place in 1972. On July 3rd, over 25 people saw an unusual aircraft in the sky. Its shape was reported as triangular and translucent. It was observable for more than 30 minutes. Concerned citizens even contacted the Navy SEALs. In 1976, witnesses driving en route 44 saw two unusual crafts landing near the road. In the spring of 1979, many people in the area of Bridgewater reported seeing a very large, low-flying triangle or pentagon-shaped UFO. The wave of sightings became known as the Bridgewater Triangle Incident. Former WHDH reporters Steve Sabrakia and Jerry Lopez were two of those witnesses. They are on their way to see Raynham-Taunton racetrack and stuck in traffic. They were shocked to see a baseball diamond-shaped UFO over their heads. One of the men claimed it was so close he could have thrown a rock at it. They stated that the object was about 2 to 3 car lengths long and wide. People in the area report low-flying crafts for weeks prior to their encounter.
Worked at WHDH radio, and we were heading down to the Raynham dog track, and when we got off 24 onto 106, I noticed this really bright light over the tree line, and the light was coming closer and closer and getting bigger and bigger. And I remember saying to Jerry, "What is that over there?"
Aside from the slew of UFO reports in the 1970s, another wave would hit in 2013. Story from nuforc.org, 3/20/2013. I saw a large triangular-shaped craft with greenish lights. This craft moved back and forth and side to side at very high rates of speed for approximately 2 to 3 minutes over Bridgewater State University. It was above the tree line by the football field, after moving side to side, and then took off extremely fast. Submitted to UFO Report Massachusetts, 9/11/2013, at 5 a.m. I saw a small light going across the sky. All of a sudden it shined a spotlight. It was so bright I thought it was a helicopter, but it was too far up. This was in East Bridgewater. Submitted to UFO Report Massachusetts, 9/14/2013. At approximately 8 p.m., I saw 5 large red orbs in the sky in a circle, square formation. They traveled south. Approximately every 30 seconds, another red orb would appear. Then it stopped after about 10 minutes. They would have been over the south end of South Street or North Middleborough. It's hard to say how many total or even yearly UFO sightings in Bridgewater Triangle have been reported, as that information is not so easy to find, but nuforc.org is a great source for some information. For Massachusetts State, 2,573 reports have been shown, and from what I can see, a lot of them come from Bridgewater Triangle, especially in the vicinity of Fall River and the town of Bridgewater. Many of them are spotted on Route 44. Another big topic that continually circulates from the triangle is Bigfoot. Most of the sightings are located in the heart, which is the Hockomock Swamp, where the majority of overall activity within the triangle happens. Bigfoot is often seen entering or exiting the swamp or just wandering its borders. A 2014 article released by Kristen Evans tracks sightings on a map and shows a line of travel directly north to south. In 1970, the local police were deluged with calls of a 7-foot-tall bipedal creature, and although there was supposedly no bear in the area, it sparked a bear hunt. After several more stories surfaced throughout the 70s, Bigfoot investigator David Brake took a look into the issue. Since then, many other investigators have followed suit. One of the most famous reports came from Joseph DeAndrade in 1978, when him and a friend were out actually looking for any signs of a Bigfoot. "Something in my mind told me, turn around and you will see," he said. "I saw what I will never forget for the rest of my life. It was 200 feet away, and it was walking slowly, like Frankenstein, into the brush." He and his 2 friends formed the Bridgewater Triangle expedition team to search for answers further, but never spotted Bigfoot again. Another story of Bigfoot in the 1970s stemmed from John Baker, who had been running traps for muskrat one night. A mile from home, while working in his canoe, heard thin ice crack close to his vicinity. He looked and saw the shadowy silhouette of a hairy beast following him. Working 30 years in the swamp, he was very familiar with the usual sights, smells, sounds, and creatures. To this day, it still baffles him. The swamp is large, spanning roughly 17,000 acres, and is the largest vegetated freshwater system in Massachusetts. The creature, despite the occasional sighting, remains safe within the ancient confines of the swamp. It is still a very remote place and still has chunks of glacier within. Some of the water is pretty deep. The Wampanoag Indians used the swamp for many of its resources and showed it a lot of respect. Some of their sacred places, such as burial grounds, are located within. The next report comes from a woman living in the area, and it occurred in 1972. "I saw Bigfoot as a young child. My family lived in Bridgewater, and at the time we were in a relatively rural community with several dairy farms nearby. The property around our home was bordered by woods, a swamp, and a rhododendron farm. On a cool, clear afternoon, we went to the burial ground to make a new fort. I'd say there was at least a dozen children gathering sticks to build this new fort. One of the children saw something moving in the woods across the stream and thought it was a bear. This thing was huge, and we could hear it breathing as it ran away. The run that this creature had was a more smooth and graceful stride, almost like it was gliding as its legs were moving and its arms were swinging, reaching halfway down its thighs. The legs seemed a bit short. It appeared to be 6 to 7 foot tall. It had a very short or almost no neck. As I saw it in profile, I could see that it was muscular. Its color was very light brown, and the hair looked more like human hair. I would estimate the distance between me and the creature to be about 20 yards before it quickly turned, looking at us, and then ran further away, back into the wooded area. My parents told me I must have seen a cow since there were no bear in the area. I did not have any more sightings while living there. However, I did notice that there were strange sounds off in the woods at night that sounded like a baby crying. This stopped after more houses were built. Another witness stated, "The neighborhood kids often talk about feeling watched in the swamp and hearing something bowling through the forest, knocking down trees. We'd also heard of people actually hearing loud, blood-curdling screams." It wasn't until I was maybe 10 or 11 that some friends and I experienced these things ourselves. Along with a slew of other phenomenon, disembodied voices, trees being thrown at us while deep in the woods, what looked like large human footprints in the cornfields, ghostly forms, strange lights, a strange squeaking sound, cult activity, you name it. Also a story from the 70s near Abington reported hearing terrible screams, sometimes 3 nights in a row. They owned several acres of heavily wooded land, with a house that sat back further than the others. Some mornings, between 2 to 3 a.m., very loud howling would start from far away, and eventually got closer. The witness said that often he was too afraid to get out of bed because it was not the sound of a bear, mountain lion, or wounded deer. The sound had a human-like quality about it. It is impossible to fit all the local sightings of Bigfoot and other paranormal activity into this video, but I will say, after watching on video some of the witnesses' stories and reading them, it is very convincing. I will also say that although a lot of stories place Bigfoot sightings within Hockomock Swamp, there are some accounts where it's in different locations, such as the case with Tracy Manzilla, who was visiting her parents at their Rehoboth home. She had grown up in the home and always felt like something wasn't quite right about the woods around it. Family members had seen strange lights in the sky or near the house. On a cold, rainy spring day in 2019, Tracy had gone for a jog near her parents' house. Passing by an old cemetery which sat about 50 feet into the woods, she saw an enormous creature standing in front of the cemetery gates. It was about 15 foot tall and had a demonic face. It was humanoid and covered in red hair. It was very muscular with a broad chest and shoulders. She was terrified and sensed something evil about the creature. Tracy ran back to her parents' house and sketched a picture of what she had seen. Local paranormal investigator Christopher Pittman quoted on a podcast that almost everyone who reports seeing Bigfoot in the Bridgewater Triangle describes something slightly different. Different heights, different colored fur, and a variety of faces. None of them are the same. It is often theorized that Bigfoot is a mystical or interdimensional creature, and in this theory plays into why he's so elusive. I'm not exactly sure where I stand with this one, but I know there are other hominids, such as gorillas, that are endangered, and they are very elusive, as well as one fact that their numbers are dwindling. Of course, this video would not be complete unless there was some form of discussion on ghosts or spirit apparitions. Paranormal sightings is very common in Bridgewater Triangle, and is one of the top sightings there. They are witnessed all over the area, but the most common focuses are Hockomock Swamp, the Forest, Route 44, Rehoboth, Profile Rock, Norton, and Taunton. I'm not even sure where to start on this subject, as there's been so many deaths attributed to King Philip's War, the cult murders, and all of the suicides, so I suppose I will randomly start with King Philip's Cave. It is located in Norton, Massachusetts, and sits on a 7-acre parcel of land owned by the Land Preservation Society. The cave gained its name because of the Wampanoag chief Metacom, also known as King Philip. He hid there from the colonists before his death. It is a common spot for paranormal investigators. The most common sightings there are spook lights or strange floating orbs. campfires seen in the distance, and inexplicable sounds of drums. Hockomock Swamp holds most degrees of the paranormal and was said to be a place of frequenting spirits before King Philip's War. The place where spirits dwell is what Hockomock translates to in the Algonquin language. Human artifacts dating back to 9,000 years ago have been unearthed there. The English settlers had their own nickname for it, the Devil's Swamp. The Wampanoag believed the dead within the swamp were overseen by the deity of death and disease named Hobomok, who was pictured as being made out of the souls of the deceased. Spook lights, also called ghost lights, are a phenomenon where balls of light are seen moving about, and they are commonly reported around the swamp. They are said to change color, shape, size, and intensity, and seem to hold an intelligence about them as they interact with humans. One of the most common spots for ghosts in the swamp is the Assinet Ledge, or Freetown Ledge. This is a man-made cliff created in the 1700s by the Fall River Granite Company. People are said they would feel the urge to jump to their deaths whenever standing upon it. It has also been host to disembodied voices, spirits, cult practices, and UFO sightings. During the 17th century, during the war, several Indian warriors leapt to their death from the ledge rather than die at the hands of English.
Woods, a young woman falls 90 feet from a cliff and survives. She was hiking in Freetown State Forest when she stopped to take a picture and lost her footing.
Several stories of suicide derive from Assinet Ledge, including one from 2014 about a man leaping to his death in front of his friends and girlfriend. His family claimed he had no previous history of depression, or even expressed suicidal thoughts. The granite of the ledge is believed to contain evil spirits within it. The nearby Taunton State Hospital was constructed using the granite. It was built in 1854 and closed permanently in 1875, with many of its details being sold off. The original campus encompassed 154 acres and was continuously being built upon over the years. It was also known as the State Lunatic Hospital. And back then, society had a pretty bad idea of what constituted mental illness and how it should have been treated. A lot of people were sent there due to ashamed family members. Just like a prison, if you were committed, it would be impossible to leave. All manners of neglect and cruelty were committed in the hospital. Even a few well-known serial killers were housed there. Many people with illnesses such as Alzheimer's to fatigue and postpartum depression were also admitted into the hospital. Rumors were abundant about the hospital, and one of them was that a local cult operated it and would conduct dark rituals and patient murder in the basement. Staff would report that an invisible force would prevent them from going down into the basement. Disembodied cries and screams would echo across the grounds and from within the hospital. The Goss building houses various spirits, including a man in white who appears on the 3rd floor. Within the hospital, a shadow man is said to crawl across the walls and hang out in the corners. Screaming from nearby woods can also be heard. Established in the mid-1800s, Taunton's Mayflower Hill Cemetery is said to be haunted by the ghost of a girl named Pearl French. She passed away in 1882 at 4 years old. Her spirit is often witnessed sitting in a large marble rocking chair over her grave. The chair is said to glow at night when she is present. Speculation around her death is that she died in a fire while sitting in the chair. One of the most well-known hauntings in the entire nation is that of the historic Lizzie Borden house, located in Fall River, which is the actual site of the infamous 1982 murder of Abby and Andrew Borden by axe at the hands of their daughter. Visitors say that some of the most intense experiences happen there, and they range from seeing full-body apparitions to being thrown against the wall or down the stairs by an invisible force. The William H. McElwain School, opened from 1912 until 1997, is a location rumored to be haunted by a former student for unknown reasons. His appearance is notably seen in one of the bathrooms. Other phenomena include faucets turning on and off by themselves, stall doors being pushed open or shut, and people feel the presence of something nearby watching them. Founded in 1840, the city of Bridgewater, many of the buildings in Bridgewater State University are rumored to be haunted. The auditorium is where a ghost named George resides, as seen by students playing in the orchestra pit at night. George makes himself known not only by apparition, but by playing instruments, locking doors, and other things that have gained the spirit reputation of being a trickster. Shea Durgan Hall is haunted by the spirit of a young woman who was the victim of strangulation in room 208 by a vengeful and jealous boyfriend while she was having an affair. Lights flicker and objects are moved or thrown by an unseen entity. A former headmistress died after falling from the rooftop of Tillinghast Hall. She had climbed up there to discipline some residents who were making too much noise at night. Tales of haunted roads in New England are always popular, and Bridgewater has its own. Aside from the recurrent UFO sightings, Route 44 is littered with stories about a phantom, red-headed hitchhiker. He is spoken of as wearing plaid and sometimes laughing sadistically. He often appears in the vehicles of those who've seen him or either keeping in pace with their vehicles. Other times, his glowing red embers for eyes can be seen shining in the darkness. He was made famous by the late Charles Robinson in the book The New England Ghost Files that went into detail about hauntings of Rehoboth. Locals have talked about the hitchhiker for decades, and the descriptions are usually close in similarities. At times, he is seen hitchhiking or walking in the woods or standing in the middle of the road. No one knows for sure who the man is or where his ghost originated from. There aren't very many first-hand accounts of experiences with the hitchhiker, and a lot of it's hearsay, but there are a few witnesses who have come forward. A woman once reported stopping to pick the man up. He disappeared as he went to grab the door handle. Simultaneously, her car battery died. Laughter could then be heard. 10 minutes later, her car started. One man had been driving alone when he saw the hitchhiker on the side of the road. He stopped to call out to the man, who began to approach. As he got closer, he eventually just faded away. Touching back onto Freetown State Forest, this has a very dark reputation as one of the scariest places in the area. We already discussed Astonet Ledge and some of the cult activity. Retired Detective Sergeant Alan Alves said that satanic activity was a regular event in the forest for 15 to 20 years. From the late 1970s to the early 1990s, officers found animals that had been sacrificed for the sake of rituals drained of their blood. Graffiti, upside-down crosses, and pentagrams were seen on a regular basis. The detective stated police believed the Fall River cult members Carl Drew and Robin Murphy conducted rituals in a hut within the forest, located in the middle. There was also a bunker discovered that was full of clothes and children's toys, possibly acquired from children they harmed. Alves was the first officer on the scene to find a 15-year-old victim tied to a tree dead. It is easy to see why Freetown Fall River State Park is known as the Cursed Forest of Massachusetts. Aside from the original cult members, the forest is also the site of 3 more murders. In 1987, a homeless man mistaken for a police officer was shot and killed. In 2001, on Bell Rock Road, 2 men were found dead with multiple bullet wounds. There are more bizarre incidents. In 2006, roving, aggressive dogs roamed the forest. In 2016, wires were stretched across pathways, perhaps as an attempt to behead passing motorbike riders.
New this morning, a warning for those who like to head out for a morning walk or a jog in some Massachusetts state forests.
Yeah, the state says you may literally want to watch your step. Eyewitness News reporter Julianne Pixoto tells us what you need to be on the lookout for live from the Southeastern Massachusetts Mobile Newsroom.
Good morning. Well, Freetown State Forest is one of several locations being targeted. Signs like this one warn park goers of a hazard on the trails and ask people to report anything suspicious to environmental police. Now, the Massachusetts Department of Conservation and Recreation says someone is maliciously laying cable wire across trails in several parks.
The forest is where a large array of paranormal encounters happen: blood sacrifices, UFOs and abduction, ghosts, black helicopters, ghost lights, disappearances, and massive snakes. Various cattle mutilations have occurred in the forest, including the butchering of a cow and a group of mutilated calves laid out in a circle in a clearing. So why is the forest so attractive to those who did all those atrocious activities? Perhaps the influence of negative energy within the park? Maybe it's seclusion? Either way, caution should be heeded by anyone who plans on entering the forest. Moving on, the legendary Pukwudgie is a great topic of the Bridgewater Triangle. According to myth, Pukwudgies is a human-like creature of Wampanoag folklore. It is short in stature, 2 to 3 feet tall. According to legend, Pukwudgies can appear and disappear at will, shapeshift, lure people to their deaths, use magic, launch poison arrows, and create fire. It is told that they were once friendly to humans but turned against them and should be left alone. A person who annoyed a Pukwudgie would be subject to nasty tricks or followed by them. They are also known to kidnap people. One of the most well-known stories that I recommend looking into is the one from Bill Russo, who was out walking with his dog one night near the Rainham dog track in Taunton. When the first settlers set foot in New England, they were warned of Pukwudgies. The settlers with Christian ideology saw them as imps or little demons, and dubbed them with the nickname Satan's Little Helpers. They shot at the Pukwudgies at every encounter. Pukwudgie encounters have been reported in the Freetown Fall River State Forest, which includes the 227-acre Watupa Reservation. Several of the suicides at the ledge have been linked to the Pukwudgies pushing people off. It has the power to cause harm to people simply by staring at them, similar to the European belief in the evil eye. Like leprechauns, Pukwudgies are capricious, and as they are spotted throughout New England, their demeanor depends on whatever Native American tribe you ask. A story from Kali Tinahira. I grew up about half an hour away from Boston in a 200-year-old house. 15 years ago, my mother used to work at 3 in the morning. I was a night owl, and it had been a Saturday. I turned off the lamp, took off my glasses, and before going to bed, I went into the kitchen. I heard a little clicking sound and looked to my left, where my dog always slept by my bed. Just then I heard my dog jump off the bed, and that's when I realized the blurry thing I was looking at was not my dog. It stood perhaps 3 foot tall on 2 legs and had wrinkled skin, pointed ears that stuck out from its head, and had reddish-brown hair. I ran to my room, slammed and locked the door, and kept my light on. I did not leave the room until the sun came up. Spotted frequently near Hockomock Swamp in Taunton is the mythical thunderbird, which is described as a pterodactyl-like flying creature with a 12-foot wingspan. In 1971, Police Sergeant Thomas Downey was driving down a road in Mansfield when he spotted a 6-foot bird with an 8 to 12-foot wingspan. Loren Coleman suggests that the creature could be another variation of Mothman, while others say it's more like a thunderbird. The encounter happened on Bird Hill at the edge of Hockomock. The Wampanoag people and other tribes have said that the thunderbird is far more fearsome and dangerous than the actual giant birds that flew in the sky over what is to become the United States. They believe that the thunderbirds were supernatural creatures of great strength and ability. They could create thunder by flapping their giant wings and cast lightning bolts from the claws of their feet. In recent times, there have been reports of thunderbirds attacking humans and carrying them off while in flight. Another famous Bridgewater Triangle legend is the dueling thunderbirds, a story about 2 huge blackbirds seen in the sky over the swamp. One sighting in 1988 involved 2 young boys who followed enormous 3-toed tracks into the woods to encounter a creature with a wrinkled face, dark feathers, and long brown legs that dangled behind it as it flew. A story from 1992 in Taunton, witnesses encountered a bird with a 12-foot wingspan, like the Thomas Downey case. In 1993, a mother and her daughter found a huge blackbird dead in a field behind their home in Middleborough. They took it home, wrapped the remains, and put it into an empty trash can. When they left and came home, the remains had disappeared, perhaps dragged off by an animal. There are countless more types of phenomena and creatures within the Bridgewater Triangle: swamp cats, ghost lights, giant snakes, zombies, and more that could be covered, but that would prove difficult in just one video made by one person. A future goal for this channel is that hopefully one day I could visit the triangle myself, to do my own personal research and document the entire visit. But for now, I worked hard and dug through tons of material to present this research to you. Aside from the usual mistaken sightings and false reports, and listening to and reading all of the accounts, it is thoroughly convincing that something paranormal is certainly going on in Bridgewater Triangle. Something that is most likely ancient, sentient, and powerful.